So I'm going to do our First Amendment. So the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition the government, and everything that falls underneath it. We've had numerous Supreme Court cases that fall with this First Amendment right. Two that I'm going to speak about is Wisconsin versus Yoder and Tinker versus Des Moines ISD. So Wisconsin versus Yoder. Yoder is the head of a family, an Amish family in Wisconsin, and according to their religion, they do not attend school after 16. Once his children reached 16, he pulled them out of school. Well, Wisconsin had a little bit of, the state of Wisconsin had a little bit of a problem with this. And so Yoder appeals it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says it is under his religion, it is for freedom of religion that allows him to do what is necessary based on his religion for his children's education. Now, Tinker versus Des Moines. Tinker versus Des Moines is a group of children during the Vietnam War that they decided to protest the war by wearing black armbands on their arm and going into school. Des Moines ISD said, we're not going to allow them to protest the war. As you can recall, if y'all remember from your U.S. history, a lot of protests were happening at college campuses and the college level for protest against the Vietnam War. And so by allowing it into the high school level, Des Moines was a little they were a little wary. They didn't know what was going to happen. And so the kids are like, no, we're going to wear our armbands. We're not hurting anybody. We're not disrupting the public. We're not disrupting the school day. We're not disrupting the school period. We're going to wear our black armbands. Well, they were asked to remove them. And, with compliance, the kids did eventually. But it was appealed up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the students, saying this is their freedom of speech. And as long as they do not violate this little tidbit that, if they do not if the protest does not interrupt the school period, does not interrupt the teaching from the teacher, if it doesn't interrupt any of this, then they have their freedom of speech. And they are allowed to do it. It's the expression of the freedom of speech. So not only are we now freedom of speech, they're allowed to say whatever they want. You're without, now that you have a few consequences. But they were using that freedom of expression, using their freedom of speech. And what's really funny is that we just did Supreme Court cases in my U.S. history class a couple weeks ago. And I made the kids, of course, do a case brief on them because they need to know them. And, of course, the state of Texas says I have to teach it to them. But these are good ones for them to learn. And it was really funny. About a week or so ago, a group of kids decided they were going to write a petition to petition the principal to non-renew a teacher because they didn't like her and, all this other stuff. And they were quoting Tinker versus Des Moines, that as long as they could have kids sign this petition and they were free to do it, as long as they did not violate the little statute that says as long as it does not interrupt the class period. So they wrote it during lunch. They wrote it in their off period. Everybody would write a little bit and they would figure it out. But it's, it's understood that once your children walk into the school building, they lose their their First Amendment right, that freedom of speech. But by quoting Tinker versus Des Moines, they had that precedence that they could use it. I was proud because, they did listen in class and they weren't just off in la la land. But they did do what they were supposed to, and they did it respectfully, and they did it quietly, and they did not cause a ruckus. Now, I have no idea what came of that petition. I'm not going to get in the middle of it and ask about it. But I was really proud of them that they decided they were going to do this in a diplomatic fashion. And, yes, it's 16 and 17-year-olds, but they're understanding. So if we can get our kids to understand what we're supposed to do, they actually listen and they want to, do things the diplomatic way. That's where we need to go.